The Clone Wars were not only fought with blasters, starfighters, and massive armies of clones and droids. Behind the battles we see on screen, another kind of weapon was being created. Invisible weapons. Viruses capable of wiping out entire populations. Ancient plagues hidden for centuries waiting to be unleashed again. And deadly biological experiments designed to turn science into a weapon of war. And one of the most dangerous of these weapons was something the galaxy had feared for centuries.
Blue Shadow Virus!
The Blue Shadow virus was not created during the Clone Wars. It was far older. Centuries before the Republic even existed in its current form, the virus had already proven how destructive biological warfare could be. Entire populations had once been threatened by the spread of this deadly disease, forcing governments across the galaxy to take extreme action to stop it. Eventually, the virus was believed to be completely destroyed. The Republic outlawed research on it. Scientists were forbidden from studying it. Records about the disease were sealed away, and for generations the galaxy believed the Blue Shadow virus had vanished forever. But during the Clone Wars, one scientist chose to ignore those warnings. Doctor Nuvo Vindi. Working in secret laboratories hidden beneath the planet Naboo, Vindi began reconstructing the ancient virus. His goal was simply and terrifying. He wanted to prove that biological weapons could be perfected. The Blue Shadow virus spreads through the air, infecting victims almost instantly once they inhale it. Within hours, the disease begins shutting down the body's vital systems. Skin begins turning pale and blue as oxygen levels drop. Breathing becomes painful. Strength fades quickly. Without treatment, the virus is almost always fatal. And that is what made it such a powerful weapon. Unlike armies or starships, a disease cannot easily be stopped once it begins spreading. It moves silently from one victim to another, turning entire cities into outbreaks of panic and chaos. When the Jedi discovered Vindi's secret laboratory beneath Naboo, the threat became clear. If the Blue Shadow virus escaped containment, it could spread across the galaxy within days. Even the Clone Wars itself might not survive the destruction it would cause. Inside the underground facility, the virus had already been prepared for release. Glass containers filled with the glowing blue pathogen were connected to dispersal systems designed to spread the disease into the atmosphere. Once released, the infection would move quickly across the planet. Entire populations could die before a cure was ever discovered. For a moment, the Clone Wars stopped being a conflict between armies. It became a race to stop a disease. The Jedi managed to contain the laboratory before the virus could be released across Naboo, but the danger of biological warfare had already been proven. Because the Blue Shadow virus was not the only biological weapon developed during the war. Another experiment emerged from the laboratories of the Separatists. One that was designed not to spread disease, but to control life itself. This weapon was known as the Geonosian Brain Worm. Unlike traditional viruses, the Geonosian Brain Worm was a living parasite. The creature was discovered within ancient Geonosian runes, preserved deep underground long before the Clone Wars began. These strange organisms had evolved to survive in extreme conditions, waiting silently for a host. When the Separatists rediscovered them, they quickly realized how dangerous the parasites could become. Once a Geonosian brain worm enters a host's body, it attaches itself directly to the victim's nervous system. The parasite begins controlling the host's movements and behavior, essentially turning them into a living puppet. The infected individual remains alive, but their mind is no longer their own. This ability made the Geonosian brain worm a terrifying weapon. Instead of simply killing enemies, the parasite could transform them into controlled soldiers. Entire groups of infected victims could be forced to attack their allies, spreading chaos and confusion among opposing forces. When a Republic squad discovered the parasites hidden inside a Geonosian facility, the danger quickly escalated. Clone troopers and Jedi began showing signs of infection as the worms spread through the base. Soldiers who had been fighting side by side suddenly turned against each other. Trust disappeared instantly. Anyone could be infected. Anyone could become the enemy. The parasites spread quickly through the facility, forcing the remaining Republic forces to quarantine the entire area before the outbreak could escape. Once again, the Clone Wars had revealed how dangerous biological weapons could be. Because unlike ordinary weapons, biological threats change the rules of warfare completely. They do not respect battle lines. They do not stop when a fight ends. And once they begin spreading, controlling them becomes almost impossible. But the most disturbing truth about these weapons is that the Clone Wars were only beginning to explore their potential. Scientists on both sides of the conflict were still experimenting, still searching for ways to turn biology itself into a weapon. And some of those experiments would become even more terrifying. Because the next biological weapon would prove that sometimes the most dangerous threats are not viruses or parasites. Sometimes they are creatures engineered for destruction. And their stories reveal just how far the Clone Wars pushed the boundaries of science and warfare. By the middle of the Clone Wars, both sides had already discovered something dangerous. Biological weapons could change the entire battlefield. Unlike starships or armies, these weapons didn't need massive factories or fleets to be effective. A single outbreak could cripple a planet. A single organism could spread chaos through an entire army. And because of that terrifying potential, some scientists began pushing the limits of biological experimentation even further. One of the most unsettling results of those experiments was something that looked less like a virus and more like a living weapon. This creature was known as the Hive Parasite. The Hive Parasite was discovered deep within abandoned Geonosian hives. Unlike the Geonosian Brain Worm, which controlled individual hosts, the Hive Parasite was capable of spreading through entire colonies of organisms. When the parasite entered a host, it didn't simply take control of the body. It connected the host to a larger biological network. This network functioned almost like a hive mind, linking infected individuals together so they could act as a single coordinated force. The infected hosts retained their physical abilities, but their thoughts and actions were directed by the parasite. For military strategists during the Clone Wars, this kind of biological control system was incredibly tempting. Imagine an army that never disobeyed orders, an army that never questioned commands, an army that acted with perfect coordination at all times. But the danger of the Hive Parasite quickly became clear. Once the organism began spreading, it became extremely difficult to contain. Each infected host became a new carrier, allowing the parasite to expand rapidly through any population it encountered. The difference between a controlled experiment and a full outbreak was dangerously small. Republic scientists studying the organism realized that if the WIV parasite escaped containment, entire planets could become infected within weeks. Civilizations would collapse not through battle, but through silent biological takeover, and that possibility terrified both sides of the war. But the Clone Wars were not fought only with parasites and viruses. Another type of biological weapon began appearing across certain battlefields, weapons that were technically alive. Creatures engineered to function as instruments of war. One of the most dangerous examples of this approach was the creation of mutated battle beasts. These creatures were produced through genetic manipulation and experimental growth techniques. Instead of relying on natural evolution, scientists altered the biology of various animals to enhance their strength, aggression, and durability. The result was a new category of biological weapon, creatures designed specifically for combat. Some of these beasts were grown with reinforced skeletal structures, allowing them to survive heavy blaster fire. Others were engineered with increased muscle density, giving them the ability to overpower trained soldiers. In many cases, these monsters were deployed in environments where traditional armies struggled to operate. Dense jungles, underground tunnels, harsh environments where droids and vehicles could not move effectively. There, the mutated battle beasts became living shock troops, unpredictably aggressive and extremely difficult to stop once released. But even these engineered creatures were not the most frightening biological weapon encountered during the Clone Wars, because sometimes the greatest threat came not from new experiments, but from ancient organisms rediscovered by accident. One such organism was the Naboo Bio-Toxin fungus. This strange biological agent was discovered growing deep within underground cave systems on Naboo. The fungus had evolved naturally over thousands of years, developing the ability to release microscopic spores into the air. When inhaled, those spores attacked the respiratory system of living beings, slowly weakening them until their bodies could no longer function properly. Under normal conditions, the fungus remained isolated within the caves. But during the Clone Wars, researchers began studying its potential as a weapon. By harvesting and concentrating the spores, it became possible to create a powerful airborne toxin capable of incapacitating entire groups of soldiers. Unlike traditional poisons, the Naboo Bio-Toxin fungus did not immediately kill its victims. Instead, it slowly weakened them, leaving armies unable to fight or defend themselves. This made it particularly effective as a strategic weapon. Entire battlefields could be neutralized without destroying infrastructure or cities. And that idea fascinated certain military leaders. But the deeper scientists studied biological warfare, the more they realized something unsettling. These weapons were almost impossible to control. Once a virus spread beyond its original target, it could infect anyone. Once parasites escaped containment, they could move through entire populations. Once engineered creatures were released, they often refused to follow the limits their creators intended. The galaxy itself became the testing ground, and that truth revealed something important about the Clone Wars. While the Republic and the Separatists fought for political control, the war was also pushing science into darker and more dangerous territory. Scientists were learning how to manipulate life itself, how to weaponize ecosystems, how to transform nature into something that could reshape entire planets. From the deadly spread of the Blue Shadow virus, to the terrifying control of the Geonosian Brain Worm, to the hive networks created by the Hive Parasite, to the engineered strength of mutated battle beasts, and the suffocating spores of the Naboo Bio-Toxin fungus. The Clone Wars revealed a side of warfare that was far more dangerous than blaster fire, because biological weapons do not simply destroy armies. They change the rules of survival itself. And once those weapons exist, the knowledge of how to create them never truly disappears. Somewhere in the galaxy, the research continues. Hidden in laboratories, buried in forgotten archives, waiting for someone reckless enough to use it again.